people sitting down, but I was out of curiosity here. How many people here actually have a board? So I got some good hands here. So maybe just to start off, while people are kind of filtering in here. So I'm David, the founder and CEO of a company called Expensify. We do expense reports that don't suck. It's a bold vision, but we're improving the world one expense report at a time. Thank you. Some applause in the front. An interesting thing, this year actually is my 10-year anniversary for the company. I started in 2008. And so most startups, when I got into this, I sort of think it's like a 4-year stint. It's kind of like, when I started, everyone's like, oh yeah, give me 4 years, sell this shit and go and do something else, rinse, repeat a few times, and then I guess just do something in the horizon or something like that. But I think that, hold on one second. Hey, thanks a lot. But I think the life cycle of a startup is actually much longer. Like the gestation period is much more time intensive than it was historically, and I think there's a broader trend there, and I think that's also a good thing. Because I think that there's this idea in Silicon Valley that we really celebrate the serial entrepreneur, the person who creates a business, sells it, and just moves on to the next thing, as if that's the definition of success. But in my mind, it's just like the idea that you worked really hard to build something and then just give it up. It's like, how can you screw up that many times in a row to make a good company that you're actually going to stick with for a while? It's like basically, I think there's sort of two major business models, if you will, in Silicon Valley. One is that you build a viable business, that you care about profitability and things like this. And the other is you just sell to a bigger sucker. Basically just like making something which you know is just a piece of shit. And you're just like, and it's fine though, because you're just hoping to dump it on some acquirer because there are so many of them out there. And it's become just kind of a truism in Silicon Valley. It's like, oh, hey man, that's cool, your company got acquired, it's great. So when do you leave? They're gonna fuck it up, of course, but you got paid, right? Cool, did any of your employees get paid? No? Well, good luck for them next time. And I think that's like this sort of attitude around Silicon Valley, is this idea of just like, the business is the product, and everyone is just, it's kind of like this, shell game where everyone's just trying to get out of it. And I think that's important to understand these two different business models. This idea of like, are you actually trying to build a business that you care about, that your employees want to stay at, that your customers are going to be with you for a long time, or are you trying to sell to a bigger sucker? And to be fair, the second of those models is by far more successful. Like most of Silicon Valley is built on that second half. That's why most of the advice to be an entrepreneur is by people who sold to a bigger sucker, telling you how to sell to a bigger sucker. And there's very little advice around the first one, like building a viable business. And the reason I sort of start with all that is I think this concept of advice is a very tricky thing, especially in Silicon Valley, which is an incredibly noisy place, because everyone here is trying to tell you basically how you should run your business. And everyone here has an angle that they're trying to sell to you. And I think that's no more apparent than when it comes to the board. And so I'd say that this title of this is sort of good intentions, bad advice. And I would say, I think the key to running an effective board, and even more generally, the key to running an effective business is recognizing that people have different motivations, and to make sure that you understand your own motivations and always stay laser focused on that. So let's just kind of talk about the various people involved in your business and like kind of what their motivations are. And I'd say like the first of those, there we go, is you. And so you're the entrepreneur. Oh shit, what have I done? Okay, there we go. You're the entrepreneur, and it's like, I'm just going to take a wild guess here. It's basically like you have all of your time in this. You wake up in the morning thinking about it, you go to sleep thinking about it. Every day is sort of always on. And as a result, it's just your entire psyche and your personality and your ego is wrapped up in this thing that you're trying to just squeeze out of thin air to make happen. Probably your finances are not nearly as generous as you would like to be at this point. You're always strapped. You're scrambling to find the next investor, the next employee, the next customer, whatever it is. And your life is hard. It's a real rough life because looking at the stats, that basically 95% of all VC businesses fail utterly. Meaning it's like basically no return to anybody. And so you're entering this world where basically the best practice that everyone tells everyone is 95% failure. It's like, if you had a book that was basically like, yes, read this book, it's great, 95% of the time people fail when they follow it, I'd be like, fuck that book, that's a terrible book. But it's still the best book we've got. And the reality is we're entering a world that's tough. a world where basically failure is not merely common, it is the norm. And success is very exceptional. And that is the world that we signed up for. And it's an awful, terrible, grueling world. But that's the world that we're in. And we're in it because this is like the big leagues. This is where we want to step up to that plate and swing for the fences. And that's our whole mentality around that. But that's not the same mentality as everyone else. Okay, is this thing going to work for me? Okay, let's make this happen. That works too. Your employees are quite different. It's like, so your employees, they've hitched their wagon to your train. And so obviously they're super invested in making this work out, but not quite to the same degree. I mean, if you succeed, everyone succeeds. But if you fail, it's your fault. And their psyche is not going to be like, if you fail in your company, because which you probably will, you're probably going to be devastated. Your finances are in ruins. Your marriage suffers. Everything about your life is in tatters. So your employees are like, well, I get another job. It's a very different series of kind of consequences to these actions. And so I think it's important to be honest with yourself about that and recognize that being a founder, being an entrepreneur, is a very difficult and different job than the employees. It doesn't matter. The difference between the first employee and the second employee is light years apart. And even if you're starting around the same time and things like this, I would definitely encourage you to be aware. So first, if you're going to structure essentially things with co-founders and so forth, never do 50-50. Always make sure someone is firmly in charge. Because otherwise, when things get tough in the future, it's very difficult to resolve that in sort of a non-acrimonious way. And so long as there is someone in charge, and so long that person is you, recognize that your job is actually quite different. You're taking on a burden that others aren't. And there are great rewards to come with that, but you should also accept that there are major consequences if you don't. Come on, yeah. So I'd say there's you, then there's employees, but there's like angels. And so we talk about investors, and I would say the great thing about angels is individuals are putting their own money where their mouth is. Basically, there's like two classes of angels, as you were. There's angels, which like they have some money, but not a ton, and so therefore they actually really care about the consequence of that investment. And there's super angels, when they have this shitloads of money, and they just don't really care. They're just kind of just like playing around with you. And so I think the super angels are the best, because basically they're going to give you money, and they just want to be happy, and they're just going to leave them alone. Regular angels are a little tougher, because they actually care about the consequence of that investment in a very meaningful way. And so as such, when they come to a conversation, it's really about the outcome. Like, your quality of life, your employee's quality of life matters far less to the angel or to an investor than you do. Next, let's start to talk about these guys. And I use the term guys because independents are always guys. It's some white dude that your board forces you to hire because they're basically, it's like, you know how the conversation goes. It's like, oh yeah, it's cool, what you guys are doing is really cute. And so I'm impressed how far you've gotten, basically, with how little you have. Maybe we should bring in some experienced people to surround you with them. So it's like, they're going to say, people have been there, done that before, they're going to help you execute scale and things like that. Fuck these guys. I would say, imagine, if you will, the life that would lead you to be the supposedly great independent. It's like, first, you must be, everyone talks like, oh, this guy's so great, so smart, succeeded a bunch of times. If he succeeded a bunch of times, why is he selling his time to me? That's like, my startup sucks. I know that more than anybody else. And he's the guy who's going to come rescue it? How am I the best option that this person has at the end of their very long career? There's no way. Because the reality is, most of the independents, there's a more likely narrative. And that is, especially if you look at the resume that you typically get from an independent. It'll be like this on LinkedIn. It's this very long career, always coming in basically right after a company raises money, and always leaving right before they fail or right after they exit. And so basically they swoop in after the hard work's done. They either claim glory or escape unscathed. And this is their entire career. I think, especially in Silicon Valley, there's like this predatory industry of the so-called independents that basically just don't really accomplish much, but they cost a ton. Like, conversation with a board member will be like, oh yeah, this person's great. You know what? I bet we can get this person for only 5% of the company. 5% of your company? I mean, that's a shitload of equity to do basically nothing, to show up for like a couple hours every month or whatever. No, independents are the worst. And I think it's important just to kind of like, if you're talking to one or considering one, ask them, like seriously, dude, why do you want to waste your time with me? Like, what is it? Is it because I'm awesome? If you truly like me, why do you want me to pay you? Okay, like the best advice comes for free from people who genuinely care about you. People who are in the business of selling their advice give shitty advice because no one is the expert in the future. You can only be the expert in the past. And the past isn't that interesting. You need to have a team that's really focused on the future. And independents basically are just selling their credentials from years ago. The next one I would say, if I can, there we go. VCs. Now VCs are the most interesting of all. I'd say like there's this, a challenge I would say, is that basically to be a VC is to have a super shitty job as well. Like, I mean, I think that, the nice thing about being an angel investor is that you're already rich. The nice thing about a super angel is that you're insanely rich. An independent is basically you're already mostly successful, and so you probably have a giant mortgage, and so you need to keep finding kind of like your next gig. But like every couple of years, you just switch gigs, and that's fine. So it's not so bad. You find like a good method to basically get your bills paid. A VC is tough. I think it's tough, man, because to be a VC, think of what that actually means from a daily basis. I know that we glorify the VC lifestyle. It's like, big parties and all this sort of stuff. VC parties are not that good because they're actually, the wine's terrible, the audience is really sort of like full of all these ideas that basically most of them are terrible because they know more than anybody that 95% of the people they're going to talk to are going to fail outright. But the hardest thing about being VC is there's no way to tell which 5% are going to win. And so you have to basically suck up to everybody on the hope that maybe you can find one of these 5% chances. But you also realize it's like actually there's the best VCs are the ones who recognize they have no idea how to pick a winner. And so they just spread their money everywhere. And so it's basically just trying to get into as many deals as possible, recognizing that like you're talking to these people that have no idea what they're doing because it's fine because no one has idea what they're doing. It's no slight to them. And some might succeed and some might fail and you have no method. But the worst thing is, to be a VC is actually not to be like investing your own money. Because a VC basically borrows money from one group and gives it to someone else. But a VC themselves is not actually raising that money, it's pulled into a fund. That's why it's called like a VC fund. Like it's $1 billion, $500 million fund, whatever it is. But VCs aren't team players. So it's not like when you go to a VC firm, everyone's like working together in the next deal. They're competing against each other for the same money. Imagine like a pack of wolves around this giant carcass. And so it's not that you have to fight the carcass. It's that you fight all the wolves to get your bite. And then that's why I would say the VC, the sort of economics of their time is they're going to get a few opportunities to take a bite of this big carcass. And they want to take the biggest bite they possibly can. The cost of actually closing the deal to them is very, very high. And let's also think, how does a VC make money? Like a lot of people would say like, oh, VC makes money because when I succeed, they succeed. Think about that for a second. Like, imagine that you are a new VC, and we already talked about, like, previously a successful company would take 4 years, now it's like 8 or whatever it is. So you show up in day one in your VC firm. You make your first investment. Do you not get paid for 8 years? Obviously not. Clearly there's some other way that VCs are making money. And the reason is because they don't make a dime. They don't care at all about the carry check. Like, again, think of the math of this. Day one in VC school, or whatever, VC, show up to the job. And so you make your investment like, cool, I might make money in 8 years on that. But today, I actually make money because of percentage of sort of the fund size. Is any surprise that we're driving these huge funds and things like that? Because that's how they make money. It's basically a management fee on essentially what they raise, and what they raise is just a consequence of how much they can pump up what they've already invested in. But they raise funds like several times before the first of them actually generates any results. And so it's all based upon the perception of value, not the actual value. And then so like 8 years later, or 4 years later, whatever it is, you're in this VC, you've been like closing these big deals, raising these big funds, you get these giant carry checks, and then you get your first check from like, oh my God, that investment I made like 8 years ago, I forgot all about it. And that's cool, they just exited for a little bit, neat, and I've got this cute little check, that feels really good. I'm gonna put that next to my giant management fee that I get every single month. And so I'd say there's no point in a VC's life cycle where actually they care about a normal exit. Because a normal exit doesn't help them raise a bunch of money. A normal exit doesn't actually put any money in their pockets that's actually to change anything. They only care about being part of something that's going to help them raise the next fund, or something that's going to be giving them giant carry checks. They want to be like Uber or basically nothing. And so is there any surprise that basically when you're dealing with a VC, that they're basically driving you towards what is the thing that's going to cause you to raise the most money possible and take the biggest chance, the biggest swing on a huge exit. Anything less than that is not interesting. If you're not raising money, you're not making them money because they still money. Imagine you went to a hot dog stand and you're like, what should I do for my business? They go like, well, I think you should eat more hot dogs. It's like, you shouldn't talk to that guy. That's the wrong person to ask for advice. And so I would say instead, recognize that basically everyone on your board and everyone around you has their own motivations. And people can try to kind of overcome them, and I'm generalizing a lot of things, obviously. But it's good to sort of dig down and understand what's really driving people to be in that room at that time, and what is behind the advice that they're offering. That's why I think that comes to the board meeting. Now I'd say the board meeting is interesting because it's another one of these things that we sort of celebrate as a really important event. And I would say board meeting is the most boring thing in the universe. Nothing interesting happens in the board meeting. And I would say, that said, the board meeting is kind of you know that phrase, it's the most dangerous place in the world to be is on an operating table. It's boardroom's kind of the same. Most companies are killed in the boardroom. Not by the competition, not by anything else, by the stupid ass decisions. But those decisions, though they maybe get formalized in the boardroom, they were made way before that. And so I would say the best way you run a board meeting is to make sure that there is nothing being discussed in the board meeting. And anything of interest, even think about that. What kind of issue is so important that it requires the board, but also so simple that it can be discussed in 2 hours and decided upon? There is no decision like that. Or if you're making actually important decisions with information in just a couple hours discussion, what are you doing? That's a terrible idea. Instead, you should figure out who are the important people for this decision. I guarantee it's not your board most of the time. And then, plus, because whatever complex decision it is, it's complicated. And think of the life of a board member. It's I'm either a VC, I'm an angel, so I'm spreading my time between a whole bunch of different things and just living my life because I'm pretty rich. I'm a super angel, I'm insanely rich, and I just don't care about any of this. And I'm just kind of here to show up and have fun. Or I'm a VC, and it's just man, I gotta close deals. It's are you raising money? You raising money? No? Okay, I gotta go close more deals then. And so I would say no one in the board is actually motivated to care at all about anything that's happening there because it's too complicated. Especially when it comes to imagine the VC is trying to basically compete with their peers to invest in their company. The way that they get it is not their money. They're not motivated by your success, really, in the grand scheme of things, because they're probably going to switch firms before their fund even closes, and it's all super secret anyway, and probably by the end of your career, you will literally never know if you ever did anything useful. But you've made a lot of money along the way. And so I'd say, when you're in the boardroom, the challenge is no one has time to pay attention to the nuance of your business except for you. But you have a whole bunch of people sometimes who basically can weigh in on the consequences of your decision. You need their permission, even though they're not going to give you the time and interest to actually understand the decision well enough. That's what makes the board so complicated. Is basically there are a whole bunch of people with different motivations, which somewhat align with the success of the business, but not perfectly. And so that's why I'd say going into a board meeting with the expectation that everyone is going to understand your business in all of its detailed nuance is actually kind of a naive approach to running the board. And I would definitely suggest instead, any decision that's of any merit to you whatsoever, work it out ahead of time, such that by the time you show up at the board meeting, everyone just says yes. And you spend 2 hours looking at charts and everyone goes home. And so I would say the challenge for running a board and running a business again is understand the motivations of everyone involved and understand those motivations often conflict. And your job as an entrepreneur is not to seek consensus. It's not like we hey guys, should we do the awesome thing or the stupid thing? Oh, we voted stupid thing? Well, I guess I'm the CEO, I should go with what the board says. No, your job is not to work for the board. Your job is to make your company succeed, and your board's job is to push back on your worst instincts. They challenge you. It's do we really have the money for that? Or are you sure we don't need to raise more money in order to do that thing? And it always involves raising more money. But basically, I would say, the job of the board is to constrain you, but not to lead you, not to direct you, and certainly not to stop you. And that sort of last point is what kind of brings up this one. It's very important to understand the difference between soft power and hard power. And I'd say, I think most people have no idea the true extent of their power as a CEO. Basically, what things can you do without asking anybody, and what things do you literally need to ask others? And most people assume their power is far much less than it actually is. And they'll like basically, I made this mistake for probably like the first 5 years of the business. I'd like talk to the board, ask them permission, all sort of stuff. And at the very end, I'd be like, why am I talking to you? I can just do this. I actually don't need to actually get his permission. So I'd say understanding the limits of your hard power, which generally align around you need their permission if you want to issue a new class of shares, if you want to give yourself a raise perhaps, if you want to take out a giant loan, something unusual out of ordinary course of business. But it's a very small list. How you compensate your people, what crazy ideas you do, product knowledge stuff. You could probably do just all of that by fiat. And anything you can do by fiat, you probably should do by fiat if you truly believe in it. And that's where the rest is soft power. Basically, there are lots of things that you can't do by yourself, but you can convince others to do through a series of, cajoling, begging, placating, whatever emotion you want to use for the time. Like you have a wide variety of tricks in your toolbox there, but the important thing is know at any point in time what you can do and refuse to not do the thing that you can do just because others don't like it. Like your job is not to compromise, your job is to succeed. And the only time you should be compromising is if you actually lack the authority to do the thing you want, and then you just need to win people over. So I'd say, in a sort of, is that my last slide? I think so. Well, maybe not. Okay, we're just going to call it that. And so anyway, I would say, it's pretty much all I have to say about this. To summarize, the people around you, they might want to help. In fact, many of them generally do want to help. But people can only help based upon the framework of their lives. They're not going to sacrifice themselves for your glory. And so you need to find a way to first assemble a board full of people that you genuinely trust, whose interests you understand, that align more often than not along the path you want to go. Second, make sure that you're overt and candid about your own goals, and that you get people who are okay with that, and you're going to push back, but not push back into things that you're not going to compromise in. Third, understand what you can do, and insist upon doing that, and then only compromise on the things that you can't do by yourself. And fourth, attempt greatness. It's like, this is your life. You're an entrepreneur. Do something fucking rad. Like, take the time to figure out what is it you want to do. I think everyone is so afraid to try to do something amazing. I think there's this term which has a lot of sort of cachet around Silicon Valley. It's like the imposter's dilemma. Basically, like we all feel like we're not supposed to be here. Like someone's just going to realize, it's like, wait a second, who are you again? That's your qualifications? Get out of here. But like, that's not going to happen. I think fundamentally, you are the best and the brightest. You're here because you think you're smarter than the next person. So if you're smarter than the next person, why are you asking them for advice? Just find something awesome that you want to do, then fucking do it. And if it doesn't work, well, maybe you learn something along the way. But there's nothing worse than basically doing something that you didn't want to do, seeing it didn't work out, and then realizing you were right. It's like, what's the point of that? That's just a big waste of time. If you're going to fail on your own merits and make it educational, and try to do something big. And I think that a challenge is a lot of the people around you are going to push back on you attempting greatness because their mentality, their motivations don't necessarily align with that. They might want a smaller exit, a safer bet. They might want to replace you with someone they trust more, or they just don't care whatsoever. Whatever it is, don't let that stop you. Know what you want to do, and then pursue that with vigor because that's ultimately what your job is. Thank you.